session. Dr. Mike Stacy, Mr. Justin Kaiser, and Dr. Sarah Schobel. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to this session. I think we're muted. Wasn't just me, Abby.
Yeah. All right, sorry about that.
You're fine.
I'll start out by saying that I'm only here because Keith was a fraternity brother. He has a lot of dirt on me, so he called in a favor and told me I had to present. So I actually let him pick the topic, and he thought that this might be a topic that worth sharing, especially during the time of COVID. So I like to start with ground rules anytime that I start a presentation or a meeting here, and I love this GIF of Elmo with the fire. You know, it kind of represents either my presentation or COVID. You can decide which. But we need to agree on a couple of ground rules. Number one, COVID has been difficult for everyone. No one's got any passes. It doesn't matter what level of leadership that you've been in. COVID is a really difficult situation. So let's all agree on that and set it aside. The second thing, we need to remove all stereotypes. This presentation is as much for the first place where I started my leadership journey, Powell County, Kentucky, as it is in the middle when I was in Fayette County, as it is now to Beechwood. We all have our own struggles. It doesn't matter where we are leading a school or an institution. And then finally, we don't have to agree on everything to agree on most things. And that's something that we talk about all the time here. And this climate of very intense political situations, I think we've forgotten that there is a balance, that we're, as leaders, we're not going to agree on every single topic that we discuss, but I think we can agree on most. All right, so I'd like to start by chaos being viewed differently by different people. So this goes all the way back. The very first time that I can reference this is The Art of War by Sun Tzu. But you know, it's a critical concept that as leaders we need to understand. And when I coach, I happen to be fortunate enough to coach some leaders in different states and around the United States and Canada, and that's been great for me as a leader here. And right now, I really see two types of people. I see the guy on the left here with the bag and the baggy eyes, and they're hunkered down and they're really just trying to get through and wait for whatever it is, to pass. But then I also see a second group that's running towards the situation, the chaos, because they see so many opportunities. And we always talk about through COVID. I mean, we're talking about if we go back to one of our first rules, that leadership is hard, COVID is hard. All right, we're talking about potentially 4 to 5 straight years of a chaotic situation that is impacting schools and districts. So as leaders, I truly believe when we come out of it, there's going to be schools and school systems way far ahead, and there's going to be schools and school systems way far behind. We discuss this often. Now, I know this is a lot of information, but again, we have our links on our presentation, and then this is more for your situation, for your references afterwards. First of all, productive culture, and what does the productive culture means? If we're accepting that the challenge of COVID and the situation that we're in is extremely difficult, okay, how do we get through that? And we discuss a lot of times about a productive culture versus a feel-good culture. And I have all these different sayings, and I apologize for most of them, but I call it the treat cart culture. And sometimes we get caught into that concept, but really for me and our team, we really try to maintain a productive culture of learning. And what does that mean? And you see 6 things here on the left that we really try to focus on. And this comes from 20 years of mentoring principals and being a principal myself, and trying to look at things that rise to the top. And I listed 6 things that I really believe are keys for leaders in buildings or systems. That cultural awareness, being able to reflect on yourself and others, innovative mindset, not being stagnant, management focused. I mean, it is your responsibility as a leader to keep people focused to outcomes, consistent communication around your why. And I tell my crew all the time, the moment you become sick and tired of the things that we're getting ready to talk about here in just a second, the more your people are starting to listen. Self and organizational leadership, being a learner, being a grower, and then void of daily drama. Productivity drives change, change drives conflict, and then how are you managing conflict and keeping that from taking away from your goal? So before I go any farther, I want to take a time out because I'm throwing stuff really fast, but your why, your foundation, your center is absolutely the key to being fitting outside of, not being the person blowing in the bag, but the person running to conflict. Because if you've identified your why, if you've really established your why and you've built with your team of leaders within your building or your team of leaders within your district, then I believe that you can stay focused and grounded during the chaos. And being able to stay focused and grounded during the chaos is really separating institutions right now. Now, how do you do that? First of all, I'm just going to introduce, and I'm trying to keep it really brief because I started to do the presentation, but then I'm the superintendent, right? So how am I developing? Well, you've got to hear from my crew, right? You've got to hear the process and how we went about implementing. And I'm going to come down real quick to vision and mission number 8. All right, systems are in place for implementing all of this. All right, knowledge versus implementation, I believe, is the story of educational success and failure, right? So, so many times, heck, I did a dissertation on knowledge of formative assessment versus the ability to implement a formative assessment for change. And I could talk about that for another hour. But anyway, back up just real quick. Once you've established your why, then I believe you have to tie that to a brand. Once you have a brand, you've got to message the brand. Or is that message in the brand burnt into stakeholders? I mean, can every single stakeholder you have identify your brand and your vision, maybe if they don't even have the right words? Do you have strategic outcomes? Are they in print? Does everyone from the board to the cafeteria workers see them? Are your brand and message tied to your strategic outcomes? How are you monitoring your outcomes in production? Because if you're not producing, doesn't mean anything. Who's accountable for the outcomes, and are they part of the decision-making progress for implementation? And I will say that right there is another big hurdle versus knowledge to implementation. So many times as leaders, we want to sit in a room with other leaders and develop this whole process without bringing in the stakeholders that are going to be responsible for implementing. When you're a building principal, who implements? Your teachers. So I think it's critical to have a lead team that's helping develop these goals. As a district, it's my building level principals, and that's why I brought Sarah today, and then Justin ended up. But I would hope that even Zach at the elementary, our brand new assistant principal in the elementary this year, if they can't answer these questions and email them, ask them. If they can't answer these questions, then I've got a problem. Now, as we move in, and I apologize, I'm going to be quiet and turn it over, but your job over the next few minutes, number one, are we full of it? If so, kick us off and go to early lunch. I understand. If not, how do we move forward in a time of chaos? And I guess the one thing I would ask, we looked over the last 12 months. Beechwood's received more accolades over the last 12 months than any time in our history as an institution. So it's been a really profitable year for us on external outcomes. Are you moving forward? Another question. Are you stalled? Or worst case, are you in reverse? And I do believe, and I tell my team every single opportunity that we have in cabinet, COVID will be the accelerator of winners and losers. The gap is going to broaden when we come out of all this mess, which eventually we will. The gap is going to be wider than it was before we went into it. And then finally, what can you do today through the end of the year to be ready to rock and roll for 22-23? All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Justin and Sarah. I don't have any idea who's going first or last, but they're the ones that are in charge of implementation.
Hi, everyone. So Dr. Stacy asked us to come in and kind of talk about, since this is a principal EdCamp, from the building level, what that looks like and how during these times, kind of what are the cornerstones, the pieces that have really helped us to maintain culture through all of this. And we just want to say first that this is not us by any means. This was a cabinet team. So Dr. Stacy, his entire team of district level people, the elementary principal and assistant principal, Justin and I, and all the district leaders. So that has been really powerful to get everyone on the same page. And I know we're a small district, so that's a bit easier, but whether you're looking at a district view or a school view, we're just going to share a couple of things that helped us, helped our team, and maybe you can use that too. In kind of the session page, we linked everything from this presentation to our branding and some of the strategic plan things we're going to talk about. In regards to culture, Dr. Stacy talked about kind of that productive culture. And I think a lot of that started with those high expectations and common messaging. So from our district cabinet team, everybody from the superintendent down to me, the assistant principal, was a part of building this Beechwood way that you see on the screen. A lot of districts and schools have vision and mission statements that are up on a wall or they're in a handbook, but really do not play a big part in day-to-day work. We're kind of, for a while there, we were getting to a good place if people even knew what the message was. We've gone from not just people know what the message is, but our kids know what it is, and it's a part of everything that we do at the elementary school and the high school. Those top three statements that you see there are kind of our guiding principles. That's how we make all decisions. Parents know that, kids know that, teachers know that. So we created those together to really say, okay, why are we here? How are we going to make decisions? And then the bottom components isn't students and staff. We are all learners and leaders at Beechwood. And so again, it looks a little bit different than a traditional mission statement, but that's something that everybody was able to understand and be able to go into every part of the classroom, every day-to-day interaction. So even when we're choosing students of the month or teachers of the month, they're around these things. Our newsletter has a theme of the month for each one of these. Our athletic teams, extracurriculars in the classroom, when students are talking about how they're growing, they refer to these things. So it's truly something that we live day in and day out. And that common messaging has been really powerful.
So when we first considered putting this together, we found out we didn't have a brand issue. We had a brand, Beechwood had a brand. If you're not from Northern Kentucky, you may not have ever heard of us, but from a local aspect, we've had a brand. I think what we lacked was a brand identity. And so the We Are Beechwood was a saying, but we never applied any actionable items to that saying. And so those three guiding principles and the expectations below allowed us to provide an identity to what our brand wanted to be. That came at the same time in which we actually did rebrand in regards to the visual aspect. So those two things happening at the same time allowed us to set the foundation of no matter what has occurred in the past 7 years since this, no matter what has happened, especially you throw COVID into the play, we were allowed to, or this allowed us to come back and hold on to this as our anchor for all decision making. So very proud of the work that has withstood the past 7 years of time in regards to this vision and mission.
Yeah, I think that consistency piece is important too. If you haven't done that as a school or district and kind of decide what is your why, what is your true mission and vision, and then stick to it, be consistent. I think we all know in education, there's some chasing of fads and flip-flopping. And so we're going to kind of talk about a few ways that we've tried to stay consistent throughout the years, but keep growing.
So you're only as good as you are consistent, and the Beechwood Way, that branding has allowed us to develop some consistency from a 3-year strategic planning standpoint. So 4 years ago, this is our roadmap to excellence. It was our first 3-year strategic plan. That just ended, and we're in year 1 of our second one. And so the key to the strategic planning, the key to the 3 years is to make sure you're tying your vision and mission to that. And so from a branding standpoint, from a language standpoint, those threads have continued out throughout both of the 3-year strategic plans. And at the end of the first 3-year, we didn't throw it all out and retool with a new, completely entirely new different 3-year strategic plan. There are common threads that run through both. And so again, as you start to grow your brand and you grow your culture within your school, there is consistency. And that consistency is what I think everybody's looking for in education. Some year to year, we're going to continue this work. You tie into that the monitoring that has to occur with that. So this 3-year strategic plan is linked. You will be able to see the common threads and the alignment from the plan to our mission and vision, the Beechwood Way. So we're not going to dive into the year by year, but you'll see how it develops into our current 3-year strategic plan. These are the kind of the alignment. A lot of words, a lot of actionable items here, but I think the key to the strategic plan is that we monitored, we evaluated, and we implemented. And so Dr. Stacy said before, knowledge to implementation or ideas to implementation. You as principals out there, you're getting a lot of ideas from probably central office or district. They're theoretical a lot of the times and best practices. How do you get those into classrooms on the ground? And that's the implementation piece, and that's the hard piece from a building administrator aspect. So the consistency in the language that flows from the district perspective down into the school, we're using the same language, we have the same goals. That alignment allows us to implement a lot easier. And so you'll see as you go through from the starting point to where we are now to the next steps, it's best practice on how to develop a strategic plan. So a lot of information there. Won't go into detail too much on that. So that 3-year strategic plan ends, and we're now in year 1 of strategic plan number 2. This is our next 3-year. This is the blueprint for excellence. Again, with the branding, you can see there's a consistency, a theme that has played throughout. This one is tied to a major construction project that's going on. So not only do we have a little bit of COVID going on, we also have a major construction project in the center of our campus that is underway right now. And so you talk about being able to maintain a focus through any form of distraction or chaos. This strategic planning, the Beechwood Way, our branding is going to allow us to hold on to those anchors of the why we're doing this. And so that has allowed us to kind of maintain our focus throughout the past 7 years, but the next 5 to 7 years of this project.
Sure. Justin just talked about anchors. And so I think another part of that is people knowing what are your big anchors. We talked about the Beechwood Way, but from the strategic planning standpoint, goals can get very complicated, complex. And there's an internal and an external component to this. So when you're communicating brand and your strategic plan, what are the external stakeholders needing to know and see and hear? How are you communicating that versus the internal that's much more detailed? We have big detailed plans that are internal and by department and grade level and such, but for simple goals that everybody can know and work towards. I'm sure every school in America is working on these. Personalized learning, a lot goes into that. Leadership, wellness, culture, and community engagement. Each of those things we will probably always be working on, but it will change how we are working on that. But as you know, during these times, I think we could all say there's a lot of noise out there, whether it's from community, parents, staff, anything like that. When we can always come back to something that is an anchor, that is a goal, and refocus, that has really helped our staff culture-wise, that they can see a purpose to the work that they're doing, that they can see a goal. It's high expectations, but they're supported throughout. So we really just tried to narrow that down as a cabinet team to 5 goals that both the elementary and high school could work on. And then we go deeper with our teams, with our schools to give details to that.
So that's the idea. Those goals are the idea, not written out as SMART goals, just general statements on what our goals are. Here's how you implement. This is the implementation piece. So the goals through our cabinet is our district and our administration, that we do a retreat every summer to develop and work on the 3-year strategic plans. And so that cabinet has got together to identify the goals of the district. And so you have our 5 goals there. So how do we start to implement? How do we engage our school and our culture in regards to these 5 goals? So what we've developed are cohorts. And so to engage our our staff in the development and the implementation around these goals, we developed those cohorts where each one of the staff members, each teacher is assigned to one. Year one, we allowed teachers kind of to sign up, and some teachers were placed in some of the 5 cohorts. So personalized learning, leadership, community engagement, wellness, and culture. And so they were, the goal of the cohort was for them to go through a year-long process of an inventory of what's going on at Beechwood. What is going well here? What are we doing? What are we not doing at Beechwood? And then following that up with site visits to other schools and doing some research on what are the best practices? What are working well for schools that are like ours? And so the combination of those two allows each cohort at the end of the year to propose an implementation for the next 3 years. So all of that built into our three-year strategic plan with engagement from each one of our teachers and our staff members to help us develop some long-term goals with each one of those cohorts. So yeah, go ahead.
So you can see we've kind of even redone professional development, professional learning, so that it is aligned to that strategic plan. A lot of districts have strategic plans, but day-to-day in the classroom, that doesn't mean much to the teacher. The teachers are a part of this work and they're owning that too. So again, looks different even year to year as we move throughout the strategic plan, but even rethinking professional learning to align to those same goals.
As they develop the proposals for implementation over the next 3 years, those items that they want to implement get put into the curriculum and instruction and assessment for the school team, which is department chairs, our school leaders. Then they look at how do we implement within the school, whether it be the high school or the elementary, and that runs down to the SBDM and then the Board of Education, so that all are on the same page. So this Monday, we're doing a joint session with our SBDM and our Board of Education to make sure that we're aligned with the 5 cohorts and our 5 goals that run in term with the construction project that's coming up. So a lot of alignment from each level of leadership, whether it be teachers in the classroom, teachers on committees, SBDM, Board of Education, everyone speaking the same language, all coming underneath that umbrella of the Beechwood Way and how those align to the five goals in the cohorts.
And I think that's really helped our culture as a school, because teachers, principals, we often feel like it's another thing to do, or how does this tie? With this model, they all know what they're working for, what they're working towards, and how it's just a continuation of the work. Allison asked, were those goals the same as the last strategic plan? Good question. Or did the goals change? In the links, you'll be able to see and kind of dive in more, but many of them were the same. The high school had a couple of different ones than the elementary school. And so again, back to that common language, common messaging, working together, and the power in that. With this one, we aligned, we found the commonalities and kind of how some could fit into those categories and made it the same exact 5 for the whole district. Okay, Dr. Stacey's gonna wrap it up.
I would say before I leave, when you have to implement, you have to evolve school improvement, the only way you're going to get through it is if you do have that common language and being able to tie back to something. That Beechwood Way has really allowed us to fall back on that. And so I really want everyone who's here that's thinking, oh my gosh, the last few years have been rough. What are we going to do for the next 3 to 5 to 10? I really want you to look at putting in the time with your teachers, with your parents, with your community, with your cabinet to devote time to developing something like this, because it's been a huge kind of foundation for us to fall back on when things get a little out of whack. And so devoting that time, it does take a lot of time. It's a big, huge document. Those 3-year strategic plans, the Beechwood Way, that took several days, months, years to start to develop and tweak and tease those out. So as you consider something like this, we're here to help you. We can't do this in a 25-minute session, but as you start to have questions about this, we can take you through the pitfalls, what to do, how to plan around things. It's recent in our memory, so please reach out to myself or Dr. Schobel. And then, sorry, I just wanted to say that before that we're available.
All right, excuse me real quick. I'm poor short people. All right, so I hope you can start to, number one, let me first say, anything, I joke about just about everything except work. I don't joke about what I do. I don't joke about wanting to have outcomes. And I don't joke about wanting to make my institution the best place it can be for kids. Everything else is pretty much on the table. But with that being said, I just want to take a couple minutes to recap. Number one, I grew up kind of out in the country, and I used to go fishing all the time. And I'll tell you, many times in a boat, if you don't have a trolling motor or anchor and you try to fish, you end up all over God's creation. Your anchor is extremely important. If you don't have an anchor, then you don't have the ability to stay grounded. So anytime I have a first year principal or somebody starting out, I always start with this process. And again, I'll go back to purpose and product make a quality culture, not the ability to energize through external measures. And once you establish this why, and once you put a group of stakeholders together to establish this why, then I just want you to remember it's your job, it's your staff's job to come on board with that why. It's not your job to sell every single person on your staff. It's their job. They are an employee. They're an employee and they are part of the institution. So once you establish this, and once you bring, and I'll say you have to give it away. I'm Mike Stacy. We make too many mistakes sometimes as superintendents trying to be completely top down. Once you have an anchor, then you have to give it away to the implementers. It'll change and it'll tweak a little bit over time, but it has a much greater chance of being implemented and being successful. So our purpose is always the Beechwood way. And I will say our principles start out every meeting, every parent meeting, you name it. It is discussed very commonly. Our product is a completion, not the product and not the strategic plan itself, but the completion of the strategic plan. And we work a lot on 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year. 1 year is kind of your school calendar and your day-to-day operations. 3 years are going to be more athletics, buildings and grounds. 5 year going to uniforms. 5 year, 7 year more your plant itself. So basically everything we have is on a 1, 3, 5, or 7. Now I got to put this in the rally cry button as an addition to a quality culture. It's actually from Patrick Lencioni's The Advantage, which I think is a great resource around this topic. But a rally cry button is if we as an institution 3 months from now can look back and say, man, we did this one thing, we would be successful. Right now, we hit the rally cry button. Our rally cry button right now, 5 days a week, all kids on campus. Every single person on our entire campus from board to staff knows we hit the rally cry button. All right, 3 months from now, we want to say we maintain kids in school, in session. So again, it's just another opportunity to bypass purpose and product, bypass strategic planning, bypass everything and say, man, we've hit a button. So a couple of takeaways. Simon Kinnick, start with the why. There's a book and a TED Talk. Culture Code, Daniel Coyle. Patrick Lencioni's The Advantage, awesome. Patrick Lencioni at the Table. And then I did attach my email and I put my cell phone. Please, anybody post this to Facebook, I'm gonna send bad things to your school. But I definitely think that we're all on the same team. We're all doing the same work. At any point in time that I can ever be of support to you or your building, please don't hesitate to ask. All right, any questions? If not, that's all we got.
There is, if anybody wants to chat with them later, you could put it in the chat and see if you can meet in a breakout room with some of the Beechwood staff after the lunch session, because after this, everyone will go back to the main room for the lunch session all together. But I really appreciate you guys sharing that seems like a really great systematic plan that you have that's so intentional. It's really good information. So I know that will be beneficial to lots of people. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments before we head out for lunch?
You guys have a great day. Good luck with the rest of the sessions.
Thank you all so much for being here and willing to participate and share.